I would like to begin by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land on which we meet today, the Arakwal people of the Bundjalung Nation, and pay my respects to the elders past, present, and emerging.
Hey everyone, and welcome to the Human Design Podcast with me, your host, Emma Dunwoody. I'm a qualified master coach and human behaviour specialist, as well as being a qualified human design coach. And I work with clients every single day to answer the big questions. Who am I? Why am I here? And what is my purpose? I also assist them to transition from the person they think they should be to the person they really are on the inside. I teach people how to actually live their design instead of just knowing it. And if this is something that you want to do too, well, stay tuned or reach out for private coaching or Human Design Unpacks, where I show you exactly how to live your design.
Hey, everyone, and welcome to today's episode. I'm super excited to share a very new type even of guest to the podcast today. And we're going to talk about something that you guys have probably heard me refer to. I've talked about it a lot. I'm going to tell you where my journey with this came from. But before I get into any of that, first I'd love to introduce Jeffrey Smith. Welcome. How are you?
Really good. Thank you.
Awesome. I'm so excited to have you. When I was just doing a little bit of research, and I found that you're the executive director of the Institute for Responsible Technology. I'm like, I'm going to love this dude. Responsible technology. This is awesome. I love it. So I want to actually start by telling you a little bit of a story. And that is that I would say before my second son was born, so he's 11, I was given a book to read. And that book was called In Defense of Food. And I started to understand about the industrialization of food and how much impact it was having on me. And one of the things that I discovered very early on, because I was diagnosed with depression and panic disorder at 28, and one of the first things I changed was the way that I ate. And I started to discover all of these things that I honestly thought that big business and government were there to protect us. And I started to see that there's this whole other world going on beneath what we see and what we think is correct. So your incredible expertise is all around GMO. So can we just sort of start with a little bit of your story, how you got to where you are today? And then let's start with the real basics, like what is GMO and why does it matter?
Well, first of all, the depression you mentioned and also anxiety disorders, we surveyed 3,256 people who shifted their diets off of GMOs and largely organic, and more than half of them described getting better from mood disorders like anxiety and depression. 85% better digestion. Then the next one was weight problems or energy, then weight problems and brain fog and allergies and sensitivity and all that. And it's all above 50%. We had 28 different conditions that all people reported getting better from when they switched to non-GMO and organic diets. Wow. And the reason I had the list of 28 for the survey is because I had asked 150 audiences, what did you get better from? And then I took notes and added them. And I spoke at a couple of dozen medical conferences, and the doctors would put people on organic diets and told me what they got better from. So there's consistency. So when I introduced this topic about GMOs, it's not lightweight. In fact, I was traveling around the world. I've been to 45 countries, and I think I was at 25, and I started speaking at medical conferences. But before then, I was embarrassed to say that people would come up to me and say, I can tell when I eat a GMO because I can feel it. And I was skeptical because I was aware of rats that developed massive problems in 10 days and all this, but I didn't somehow think that people could tell the difference. So I started presenting it to doctors, and every year back to the different conferences. And then the doctors were prescribing non-GMO diets. I didn't know that. And then they started telling me it works. People get better from these things. Someone said, I have 5,000 people I've put on a non-GMO diet and they get better. I said, can I come to your offices and interview them? They said, sure. So what I'm about to say is so fundamental to health. It's like people think, oh yeah, I know what a GMO is. Look for the butterfly, look for organic. When people realize that, like I have a film that I did with Amy Hart When kids that were on the autistic spectrum, their family switched to organic, they're no longer on the spectrum. Infertile couples have kids. This one office, 100% success rate. All of these things, and the doctors that prescribe it see it, both in humans and in livestock and in pets. So now that I've gotten people's attention, I will answer your question.
I love it. I love it.
So, genetic engineering. Okay, everyone knows what sex is. Male, female, give birth, have a kid. They take genes from both. It's natural. Birds, bees, the whole thing. But genetic engineering changes all that. So you can go in with genes from a different species and add it in, or you can rearrange the genes within a species, not in a natural way, but in an artificial forced laboratory method. And whether it's done through a gene gun, where you literally shoot millions of particles of gold or tungsten coated with genes into a plate of cells, hoping that they get in, or smuggle it in with bacteria, or use these new CRISPR kits, it creates massive collateral damage in the DNA, which is one of the problems for GMOs. But why do they genetically engineer? Well, originally it was Monsanto. They owned the patent for glyphosate, the chief poison in Roundup, which was going off patent in 2000. So there was Roundup, or glyphosate, is an antibiotic. It kills bacteria. And some person found bacteria growing in a chemical waste dump near Monsanto's factory that wasn't dying in the presence of Roundup or of glyphosate. So they said, great, let's put it in the food supply. So they took the gene out of that bacterium and put it into soy, corn, cotton, canola, sugar beets, and alfalfa eventually. And that allows these crops to survive what would otherwise be deadly doses of glyphosate and its other ingredients in Roundup. So instead of carefully spraying to make sure you don't kill the plant that you're growing, you can just spray right over the top by sprayer, by plane. And now you have two poisons, because we know that GMOs cause all sorts of damage, and we can talk about that. And you also have the Roundup, which goes into the plant. You can't wash it off, goes into the food, and we eat it. There's also crops that are engineered to produce toxic insecticides to actually kill insects. So we eat the insecticides in every bite. And then there's crops that are designed not to turn brown when sliced, apples and potatoes, that might reprogram our DNA. There's all sorts of things. So
wow.
I've been doing this for 27 years and interviewing scientists and converting the science into English and conveying what's at stake here. And right now, about half the world's population understands that GMOs create new risks for health when you eat them. And so there's been a huge wave of people not eating GMOs, and we have a lot of data showing that that improves health. But we also have charts that show as GMOs and Roundup were introduced into our food supply, all these diseases started rising, from autism and Alzheimer's and Parkinson's and cancers and IBD and Crohn's and all these different things. And we understand how that's the case. Sometimes it's clear that it's Roundup. Sometimes it's clear that it's probably the GMO, usually a combination of both. And now we're pretty confident that I could say that one of the most important steps for people to be healthy is to eat organic, because organic, you avoid the GMOs and the Roundup.
Oh my God. I just, it's so incredibly important. And as you're speaking, I'm sitting here thinking like, so what's the purpose of even starting this? And I suppose I know the answer, money, why they would have potentially started doing this in the first place, but it blows my mind. And I think one of the things that's so challenging is, like, when I had little kids, my kids are 16 and 11 now, but when they were little, I remember thinking, and we lived paycheck to paycheck, and I remember learning this, and I was like, oh my God, we can't afford that. But actually we could. And it's one of the things that I look back on and think, thank goodness that I actually learned, especially when my kids were little, how incredibly important it is. So, excuse me.
Well, while you're coughing, I'll say that the money issue is interesting, and that in one of the families I interviewed, 6 people in the family, they learned about organic at a conference, and they were spending about, I don't know, $18,000 a year in healthcare, and then the next year, no, 9,000. It went down to 3,000, and then it went down to below the cost of just the premiums. Another family that's in the movie Secret Ingredients, they say you have 3 kids in elementary school, never go to the doctor, never get sick. Another family, same thing. We hear that all the time. So when you think you can't afford it, I say take your medical budget and add it to your food budget. And while you're at it, take your philanthropic dollars and add there, because now you're also making a better world. You're saving the health of the farmers who don't have to spray this stuff. You're also supporting the biodiversity, etc. There's a lot more. We're drawing down carbon, etc., etc. So when you put it like that, and you realize, oh, it's actually something I must afford, and you realize that you'll have less fatigue and brain fog, greater ability to focus and concentrate. These are things that people reported getting better from. These are quality of life improvers. Sleep. So when you have Roundup in your body, it blocks the production of L-tryptophan in your gut bacteria. L-tryptophan is used by your gut to produce serotonin. Serotonin is converted to melatonin. Melatonin helps you sleep. So as Roundup went up in our diet in the United States, insomnia and other sleep disorders went up. When people switched to an organic diet, they declared that their sleep got better. That's one example where you can easily connect the dots.
Yeah.
In fact, if you think of autism, the slope of the autism line is so perfect with the glyphosate line. It's a 0.9975 out of 1. 1 is perfect. Now, why would they think that it's possibly related? A friend of mine, Stephanie Seneff, is a senior researcher at MIT. And she's an expert at pulling down big data and finding causality. So she pulled down all this big data, determined to find out what was causing all this autism. She knew it just wasn't improved, diagnoses. That's ridiculous. So she realized, she said she could figure out exactly why, based on the physiological changes, kids with autism acted the way they did. And she was studying all the big data on every environmental contaminant that she can find, and never quite fit. She went to a lecture by another friend of mine, Professor Emeritus from Purdue University, Don Huber, who was talking about glyphosate. He's an expert at that. She said she sat at the edge of her chair because everything he said, how it chelates, how it does this, was exactly what was fit the hand in glove with autism. So she's convinced, as many people are, that autism is driven in large part, not the only thing, by glyphosate. And I've interviewed so many parents of autistic kids who, when they switch to organic, the kids get better, sometimes off the spectrum.
I think this is really fascinating. So I've got personal experience with this. One of my good friends, her son was diagnosed with autism on the spectrum. And it was so funny. There was like, oh, it's genetic, it's this, it's that. And she just completely switched his diet. And then all of a sudden he was so much more settled. like he changed almost, it seemed, in such a short period of time. It was amazing. But what I find fascinating is that through the frame of human design, we talk a lot about, and my background is behavior, so human behavior. And also we talk a lot about whether it's fulfilling our purpose or changing, we don't like something in our life and we want to change it. For me, it was all about rewiring my brain because I was doing depression and panic disorder and I wanted to experience happiness. And I think what is so fascinating is that we're looking to change these things. And in the human design world and in my community, we talk a lot about our kids and our kids facing these things or feeling stressed. I think my question as you were speaking, I was like, well, what's the correlation with stress? Is this glyphosate actually increasing our stress as well? Because here we are trying to fix our behavior, which means our brain needs to be functioning to fix our behavior. But the problem sounds like our brains aren't even functioning in a way that we can, more easily transform our behavior. Does that make sense?
Yes, and I'll answer that in a number of ways. First of all, in the film Secret Ingredients, my friend David Perlmutter describes that the brain at rest uses 5% weight, but it uses 25% of the energy. And glyphosate damages the mitochondria, which is the energy center. And he said that's one reason why brain fog and things like that. Another is the gut-brain connection. When you damage the gut, it changes the brain. There's chemicals, etc. Serotonin, which is a happy chemical for the brain, is produced in the gut. Dopamine similarly, and the precursor to dopamine is also blocked by glyphosate. So both go on. Now, in terms of stressing, a friend of mine in when was in Moscow, she was a senior researcher at the Russian Academy of Sciences, gave rats genetically engineered Roundup Ready soybean and checked their aggression, and they were much more aggressive. And there was a couple of farm examples of pigs that became very aggressive and almost cannibalistic and biting each other's tails when they were eating GMOs. And when they switched to non-GMOs, there was a calm. All of a sudden they shifted. And some actually went from like Alzheimer's like symptoms, like kind of glazed or whatever, to clear. In the rat example, those that were not on Roundup were not aggressive. So there's examples like that in terms of research, in terms of anecdotal evidence, and also in terms of what people describe. When you think about the modes of action of Roundup, I'm going to mention this very quickly because if you're not into physiology or health, this may mean nothing to you. If you are into the foundations of health, it's jaw-dropping just how every single one of them is damaged by glyphosate. Okay, it blocks the ability to absorb minerals. It causes genetic mutations and can lead to cancer. Oxidative stress can create leaky gut, can kill off the beneficial gut bacteria, can change our hormones, can block the neurotransmitters, can damage the mitochondria, can create birth defects, can suppress digestive enzymes, breaks the communication between cells, and blocks the ability for our bodies to detoxify both it and other toxins. And I'm just getting started. So these are foundations of health, and this molecule destroys or damages them. And on top of that, you think, well, is it the Roundup or is it the genetically engineered crop? So Professor Seralini from France took a bunch of rats, and he fed rats Roundup Ready corn that had been sprayed with Roundup, and they had multiple massive tumors, early death, and organ damage. But another group was just fed the Roundup in the drinking water, and they ate natural corn. And they had multiple massive tumors, early death, and organ damage. The controls were fine. So if you think, it's the Roundup, but another group ate the Roundup Ready corn that had never been sprayed with Roundup, multiple massive tumors, early death, and organ damage. So we have a Saturday Night Live skit from 30 years ago where someone's, a fake commercial. It's a floor wax. Another woman says, it's a dessert topping. No, it's a floor wax. And you're both right, ladies. It's the best floor wax you've ever eaten. So it's like, it's GMOs, it's Roundup. You're both right. Both cause these massive problems with health. And when you eat GMOs, you get them both. And then for the triple threat, you also have the Bt toxin, which, does it kill the insects? It pokes holes in their gut and causes sepsis and kills them. And in high concentrations in laboratories, it pokes holes, the same holes in human gut. It was found in the bloodstream of 93% of the pregnant women in Canada that were tested. So how did it get in the bloodstream? Maybe through the holes that it was created. It was in 80% of their unborn fetuses. It's toxic to red blood cells. So you can put the two together. Now you have a toxin that also produces allergic reactions, which is Bt toxin. You have the Roundup or the glyphosate. You have the GMO. It's in the food supply in the United States. Americans eat more than their weight in GMOs each year. No wonder all of these more than 38 diseases are rising in parallel with the increased use of GMOs and Roundup.
And instantly it makes me go, well, what are the governments doing about it? Surely they should be stepping in. Surely they should be doing something about this.
It's like, yes, Virginia, no, Virginia, there isn't a Santa Claus.
Yeah.
So I'll give you, I don't understand. I've been to Australia a few times. I spoke to many ministers there in Canberra and in different states and stuff. And I can tell you stories about some of the corruptions that went on when I was there. But in the United States, I'm more aware of the United States and how the corporations can have influence over the regulators. And in my field, GMOs, Monsanto was the lead. They convinced the White House to promote GMOs. The White House told the FDA, EPA, and USDA to promote GMOs. So the FDA created a new position for Monsanto's attorney, Michael Taylor. Okay, you're in charge of policy when we create the GMO policy. All policies, in fact. So his policy said, GMOs, we don't know any difference. They're fine. You can just put them on the market without even telling the FDA. No labeling is needed.
Wow.
We know of no information showing any significant difference. That was in the policy that still stands today from 1992. In 1999, 44,000 secret internal memos of the FDA showed that the whole thing was a fraud. The scientists said GMOs are different and dangerous and could create toxic reactions, allergic reactions, new diseases, and need to be tested, and were angry at their leaders, Michael Taylor, for ignoring their research, ignoring their recommendations. At the EPA, Monsanto, when they were on trial for Roundup and non-Hodgkin lymphoma, we got a chance to see some of their memos and their emails. They had lapdogs in the EPA working on their behalf, trying to stop research by the government that could show that Roundup caused cancer. So it's unfortunately a very, very dangerous situation. And by the way, Michael Taylor, when he left the FDA and said GMOs are fine, and Monsanto's bovine growth hormone is fine, even though I talked to a former Monsanto scientist who said even the 3 scientists at Monsanto, after they tested the milk from cows treated with their drug, wouldn't drink milk afterwards unless it was organic. One bought his own cow because of the cancer-promoting hormones elevated. So it was just approved. I mean, in the bovine growth hormone, the person that was doing the research for Monsanto ended up taking a position in the FDA as the director of a division that evaluated her own research. The person that was working for the process of getting bovine growth hormone tested for Monsanto was in charge of the testing and approval in the FDA. The person who was essentially in charge of the policy was Michael Taylor. It passed with flying colors. After that, Michael Taylor went to Monsanto to become their VP. Then he went back to the FDA to be the US food czar. So this revolving door and the amount of money that's given and all the other ways that are targeted, we can't rely on the government to protect us. But, we can rely a lot on moms.
And, I love that.
Intelligent, educated moms. I mean, we helped educate moms all over the world, and we have so many stories of families. I mean, people come up to me in conferences and start to cry and say, "You saved my family."
Yeah.
And it's like, it's probably true because they learn from us, they change their diet, and this spiral down just reversed.
I love that. I love that you just said, that mothers can have a big impact. Because one of the things that I was thinking as you were talking about that, what I talk about a lot in my driving, at least my entire team, our driving force is shifting the power from the few to the many. And what that means is helping people to step up and take back their power, take responsibility. And I suppose that's where I want to go next. And I forgot to say at the top of the episode, for everyone listening out there, my human design geeks.
Oh, yeah, they should guess now, shouldn't they? Guess?
I know. Yeah, that would be really cool. If only we had the feedback loop, that'd be brilliant. But Jeffrey is a 4-1 Splenic Manifestor. So, and you're a cross of ideas. Like it's a rare incarnation cross, and it really is. It's this energy of the seeker. It's someone who's out there, seeking for the greater good, if you like. And being a manifestor, you're here to really inspire us all into action. And the 4-1 is a profile. That means it's kind of like your toolkit, this theme that you have that goes on in the world. And the 4-1 is actually very unique. And you guys are a force of nature when you're on purpose, like properly a force of nature. And I feel like I actually just tripped over your work. I was sitting on a train on the way to Madrid at Christmas time, and I was like, what can I listen to? And I just saw this, I think it was even on Audible, and I started listening to you, and I was like, oh my God, I have to have this guy on the podcast. So there's so much that I want to share with my audience. So I want to shift gears a bit because now people know they can't ignore it. I'm big on once you make things conscious, then it's up to you. You have to make the choice to do something different. So inspire us into action. What can we do as individuals? What crops do we need to be aware of? Or what do we need to be aware of in the supermarket? And how can we make better choices with the food that we're eating and the food that we're feeding our kids?
Great. And I'm going to talk about GMO 2.0 in just a moment. But in terms of avoiding the GMOs that are currently on the market, if something says non-GMO, then you don't know exactly what the standard is. Cheerios declared itself non-GMO in 2013. Their classic, not their honey nut. And I called them up and said, so how do you define GMOs? Do you have a standard? Do you just require affidavits? Do you simply tell your farmers not to use GMOs and don't check? And the guy said, proprietary. So we know they're doing something, but we don't know how much. So we look for groups that are third-party public standards. And in the United States, the Non-GMO Project is the best, actually. But even though it's so great and it requires testing to see if they're below a certain threshold and stuff, it's focused on GMOs, not Roundup. So you can get a Non-GMO Project verified oatmeal. Oats are not GMO. They've never been GMO. But Monsanto convinced all these farmers to take Roundup and spray it on grains and beans primarily just before harvest. Yes, it kills them slowly, but it dries them out, makes it easier. It forces ripening of all the unripened. So it's like, hey, I'll protect the kids, send all the energy to the kids. And so there's a ripening that happens. It kills the weeds in the field for next year. And so the oats are just saturated with Roundup, with glyphosate. And so is wheat. And so are the legumes, the beans, mung beans, lentils, chickpeas. Don't eat hummus in the United States unless it's organic. And non-GMO doesn't cut it then. So we say, eat organic. If you can't eat organic, at least eat non-GMO and avoid the products that have heavy-duty residues. If you go to responsibletechnology.org, I'll say it 2 more times, responsibletechnology.org. I'll say it in a minute. You go there and you can find the database of all the tests that we can find on foods at responsibletechnology.org that have the residues. You can see how high oats are and wheat and all these other things. You can find it in wine, etc. You'll notice that in almost all cases, the organic has very little or no detectable. It's still sometimes detectable because glyphosate is in the air. It's in the rain. The U.S. Geological Survey found it in 60 to 100% of samples in the rain and in the air. So it's something you can't avoid completely, but you certainly want to reduce. Yes. And so if you go to responsibletechnology.org, you go to the shopping area, and then you can figure all that out. But organic is definitely the easiest way. And if you're in an area that doesn't have organic in the stores, I know in the US, you can connect with some people that'll deliver it to you. Sometimes there's buying clubs that can buy them, and you can join one of those. It takes a little while to make the conversion, but I would say not only invest in that, but also get a spreadsheet, and every column is a different day. And at the top, you put, percentage of organic that day. And then your list is your energy level, your mood, every single symptom.
Oh, I love that.
1 to 10. All 1 to 10. So if you look at the research, your skin is supposed to clear up. You're supposed to lose weight. Many people do, whether not everyone does. So you may be focused on, okay, I've got acne or eczema or psoriasis, and I've seen that it helps. And maybe it doesn't help you that much, and you think, oh, it's not working. But you're forgetting that your headaches went away. Yeah. You're forgetting that you have more energy now. So it's good to do it objectively and see yourself change. That becomes the main, and then when you cheat, if you go on a vacation, you decide, I'm just going to go see what happens. Eyes wide open and see. Some people are very sensitive. One meal and they're back. Some people, it's a week. Some people less sensitive. So we don't know until we try.
I love that. And it's so fascinating. I remember I think it's when I was traveling. Anyway, it doesn't matter. But I had a friend that went from the States to Italy. And this friend thought... Let me
guess. In the United States, couldn't eat this.
Yes.
In Italy, could.
Yes.
Okay. I've only heard this 1,000 times.
I bet.
I'm not exaggerating too much. So maybe it was wheat.
Yeah, it was wheat. It was pasta.
All right. So wheat there's a number of things that are different about U.S. wheat. Wheat is not genetically engineered, but it's sprayed with Roundup, particularly in North America. It might be sprayed a little in Europe, so you want to avoid that and try and eat organic. But they're also the way that they prepare the bread is different, so that it has a chance to eat up some of the enzymes tend to work, and they breed the wheat here to be more glutinous and things like that. So a lot of people say they can eat a lot of things in Europe that they can't eat in the United States.
That
very,
is amazing.
very common.
Yeah. And I know like we're really lucky here in Australia. We have lots of places that we can get online and order. Like Doorstep Organics was one of the ones that we used for ages, but we're really lucky. We live in a part of Australia. It's called Byron Bay. We live in like hippie central. We get buy all of our food from local farmers markets, all organic, all of those things.
I spoke at Uplift there.
Yeah.
In Byron Bay years ago.
Yeah, it's a beautiful part of the world. We're really lucky. So, well, I suppose the next question that is obvious is, okay, well, for those of it, we're all on the scale somewhere. We're all on the scale somewhere that this is in our bodies, whether we're like me and my family, like pretty confident we have very little in our bodies, to other people that are just learning about this today. So how do we get it out of our bodies, and then maybe take us on to the 2.0 information?
All right. So people ask, what can I do besides changing? Fortunately, the body is very intelligent and starts to make the detoxification, the reparations, and the rebuilding on its own. We've seen that in rats, we've seen it in mice, we've seen it in people. But I did ask 18 experts, how do you heal from GMOs and Roundup? And I created a summit called Healing from GMOs and Roundup.
Oh, I love it. Can we still buy that? Is it on your website?
The website's undergoing some changes now. Look for, go to Secret. I would say if you go, there's a defunct website right now called jeffreysmith.org, and I think it's taking emails. So you can sign up there, and then you'll be on the list when it comes, when it
Amazing.
wakens. But you can also go to IRT, Institute for Responsible Technology, put your name on that list as well. And when everything is set, when we're reoffering it again, I'll let you know. I have a 90-day lifestyle upgrade to help people go up the learning curve on eating and living a healthy lifestyle.
Amazing.
That's going to go online. We have the film, a bunch of things. So we're just redoing the electronics, and it's a little awkward. Like I want to give people everything they need right away.
Yeah. Yes, of course you do, my manifestor friend. Now, people, now.
This is what we do.
Yeah.
All right. So GMO 2.0. So CRISPR. People have heard of CRISPR.
Mm-hmm.
CRISPR is gene editing. There's different ways of gene editing. CRISPR is the cheapest and the easiest to do. And it basically has a little molecular scissors and a little guide, some guy there with a clipboard saying, okay, cut here or cut here. It finds the sequence in the DNA, and then the molecular scissors cuts. It often cuts in the wrong place. It often creates mutations, deletions, additions, sometimes complete shattering of the genome, massive collateral damage, so much so that the journal Nature called it chromosomal mayhem.
Wow.
And we have a film at Responsible Technology called 7 Reasons Why Gene Editing is Dangerous and Unpredictable.
Yeah, right.
And that's what it is. And you'll see it's an animated 6 minutes animation. See what happens in the genome. And imagine for a moment that you can now create new organisms by simply buying a CRISPR lab for under $2,000. And you can create an organism that's never existed before on the planet, and you can take it for a walk. Microbes are the easiest, but with more equipment, you can build vegetables, and you can try and change your own genes.
Wow.
And you don't even need 2,000 if you happen to just be a high school student in the United States in one of the schools that have already gotten a CRISPR lab. You're assigned the responsibility of creating a new organism. So what this means is we're in the middle of a gene rush. We all know what a gold rush is, the Wild West in terms of gold. This is the Wild West in terms of genes.
That sounds awfully terrifying.
It's giving the keys to the kingdoms to everyone. So incrementally over time, unless it's regulated, we're going to see new types of insects, new types of trees and grasses and fish and animals and pets and food. And that's what's happening because the biotech industry was so thwarted by our education campaign and the ones that we've inspired. I've been doing this for 27 years. And with half the world's population thinking that GMOs are unsafe, they said, let's pretend gene editing is not a GMO, and let's convince the regulators, and let's gang up on them. So every source of information they get will be reinforcing of this lie, this echo chamber. So they convinced Australia. United States, just convinced Canada, the UK, Brazil, India, Japan, Argentina, all now have deregulated most of the gene edited products. Some just plants, some plants and animals, and some plants, animals, and microbes. Now that means that we're looking at the possible replacement of nature.
Wow.
And you can't recall GMOs once you put them in the environment. And the number one most common result of genetic engineering is surprise side effects.
Yeah.
So the Institute for Responsible Technology, we helped build, when I started, no one was talking about the health dangers of GMOs. All the NGOs wanted to talk about was the environment. So I wrote a book called Seeds of Deception, and it became the world's best-selling book on the subject and all this.
Yep.
And it's like, drive a new movement, travel to 45 countries, train 1,500 people to speak, organize over 10,000 activists, got on TV all over. I mean, some of the famous people, in Australia had me on their show. They came to Iowa where I was living and shot me in a supermarket where I explained how people can eat. And so we were very effective, but now we have to almost start again because gene editing is not regulated. It's not, you don't even have to tell the government if you're going to put a gene edited food on the market. It will overwhelm our food supply. It may seep into organics and non-GMO as stealth GMOs, which are hard to test. And so we're now building a new movement to stop that. And we're starting with the most dangerous GMOs, the most dangerous organisms that you can genetically engineer. Can you guess?
The most dangerous organisms? God, I don't know. Like, I hope they're not trying to upgrade their babies, but I don't know.
Well, humans are often the answer to that question, but it's not what I would answer. For me, it's microorganisms.
Oh.
You see, today we realize how important the microbiome is.
Yeah.
Right? 80% of human diseases are related to changes in the microbes. We have more microbial cells in our body than we have human cells. We outsource about 90% of our metabolic and chemical functions to the critters living inside us, and we can get away with 23,000 genes, less than earthworms, because we use the 3.5 million genes and their information from the microbes living inside us.
Wow.
It is so important for children to have the microbes in a proper diversity and healthy environment that when that happens as an infant, it prepares the whole life. It includes the whole life. So milk digesting microbes go into the birth canal in the second trimester to inoculate the baby during birth. More come from the milk, more come from the nipple and the skin. And then part of the milk is only designed to feed the microbiome. It's indigestible by the baby. If the baby has a fever or a health issue, the saliva microbiome feeds back through the nipple of the mother, changes the formula until the baby's better. The level of intelligence is so great. You know what fecal transplants are? If you don't know, it's just that. It's taking fecal matter from a healthy person and putting it in a sick person, and they get better. They lose weight, or they need to gain weight, or they overcome their disease. And it's the programming in the microbiome, and that's not even as complicated as the ones in the soil, which draw down carbon and support crops and create an entire environment that allows Earth to continue.
Yeah.
So now microbes, we know from COVID, they travel and they mutate. Most people don't know that microbes swap genes. So they'll say, oh, try mine. It's like, playing cards. Try my gene. Yeah. So there's this flow, and that helps the microbiome adapt, support ecosystems, and be supported by them. So now you introduce genetically engineered microbes with a new twist, something you've never seen before. They've never interacted with other microbes. They've never interacted with ecosystems, and you release it. And if it survives, it starts to travel and mutate, and now it's changing those weird genes with other microbes. So that influence of that one released surviving microbe may be in 10,000 different types of microbes, in 100,000 different ecosystems, and inside the human body. Now, we don't know if that's going to cause a problem. We don't know if a microbe released to remediate soil in Arkansas ends up in the infant gut in Sydney. And we don't know if it's going to be a problem, but every time one is released, you're increasing the likelihood of a problem. Now think of the CRISPR kits in every high school and every college biology class and in all these different companies. We will be flooding the biosphere with millions of varieties of genetically engineered microbes in ways that we cannot predict. And again, there's no real regulation or prevention. It's basically open season. So we want to prevent the release of all genetically engineered microbes. And we cannot predict because we've only been able to characterize about 1% of the trillion estimated microbes on the planet.
Wow.
And far less about how important they are in terms of each other. We're just discovering that. And while we're just discovering it, we're beginning to destroy it. So our first focus is to protect the microbiome, and at responsibletechnology.org, if you go to /take action, we have a letter to the Secretary of Agriculture asking him to pay attention. We have at the bottom of that the film, the 6-minute film I just described, and a 16-minute film, which is called Don't Let the Gene Out of the Bottle, about microbes. And there's one in there that I'd like people to pay attention to that was almost released that, according to the expert we interviewed, could theoretically have ended terrestrial plant life.
Wow. That is.
And she explains how, and I explain on there, explaining the circumstances under which that might have happened. And it was stopped because of some random experiment that her graduate student, she was a professor, was doing a research on this microbe. And 2 weeks before it was to be released, he came into his lab and all of the plants that were growing in the soil that had been mixed with this microbe were dead. And it was like, whoa. So you'll learn about that at Don't Let the Gene Out of the Bottle. And so you asked what people can do. Learn about GMO 2.0. Sign the letter to the USDA. We'll have things in there that are also international. I know many of your listeners are international, but sign up to be on the newsletter so you can get the next way to let your voices be heard. And then if you can, please make a donation. We were able to survive. My institute's 20 years old, and we've never had lots of money, but we didn't need it because we're focused on consumers. Now we have to change the laws. Now we have to create international treaties. It's like, there's this thing, no one left behind. No country can be left behind. No country can allow this to happen because microbes don't stop at the border. We need international treaties. We need it as part of the curriculum so everyone understands, not just in microbes, but in gene editing in general, that humanity has arrived at this inevitable time in human civilization where we can redirect the streams of evolution for all time, irreversibly, change the course of biological evolution as we know it, permanently, and that we can create a situation where all future generations will curse us for our stupidity. Or we can change our relation. Now that we have a technology that can do that much damage, we have the capacity to do more good than any generation before us, to protect all living beings and all future generations. Now that is a resume builder. I protected all living beings and all future generations. So that's where we need people to join our team. And one of the ways we're asking for it is financial support, because right now we don't have enough to do the job, and it has to be done quickly. So that's one thing. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, we'll put all those details in the show notes for sure, because it sounds like an incredibly, incredibly important thing for us to be doing. And, as I hear you speak, it just makes me, like, God, can't we as a race be so stupid to think that we know better than Mother Nature? Like, for God's sake, leave her the fuck alone. She knows what she's doing. And, like, we need to learn from her, not try and control her and all of that bullshit. Oh my God.
Something, Emma, it's interesting that you say that, because I've looked at, what's the systemic structure that's allowing this to happen. And it's very much a way in which people think other people will take care of it. It's their responsibility, and I'm sure they're doing a good job. So in a sense, it's giving the power away.
Yep.
And if you look at how that's created in the United States, our educational system is based on the Prussian system, imported because Prussia figured out a way to create good soldiers that would die for the country, take orders, and also good factory workers.
Yep.
So
we have that same education system.
There you go. Give away your power, first to your parents, then to your school, to media, to government. And then science does something really interesting. It narrows the focus. I was speaking to one of the best, most successful biologists in the world, P.M. Bhargava from India before he passed. And he was assigned by the Supreme Court to look at the approval process for GMOs in the country because of a citizen petition. And after 10 months, he reported to the Prime Minister, the Health Minister, and the Supreme Court. He said, it's all a sham. Not a single GMO in the world is properly evaluated. There's about 30 things that need to be tested for. Only about 10% have been tested, but by companies themselves in ways that are meaningless. This stuff can be very dangerous. It needs to be stopped. So I interviewed him, and I was carrying with me, because I was releasing a book in India, Genetic Roulette, and I had worked with 30 scientists to accumulate all the known health dangers of GMOs, and I categorized them and whatnot. And here he was describing all of these different things that were in the book. I said, how is it that you individually have figured all this out? Or none of the scientists that I spoke with knew what the other scientists, they had some sections, but I had to put it all together. He said, science these days is so narrow. It's so focused. I've been doing this for so long. 25 of my former students and colleagues have Nobel Prizes. I'm being asked to do big things like origin of the species. So I think in terms of all that, I look at 100 journals every month. And there's not many of us. So we give our power away systemically. We narrow our focus. And that's how we can have people at Monsanto say, okay, I'm not going to have the milk from the treated cows. Or the same Monsanto former scientist said, they fed rats genetically engineered corn and the rats had serious dangers. And so they rewrote the study to hide the effects. And he said, in Southern Africa, they have more corn in their diet than the rats were fed. The rats were fed for 90 days and had massive problems. What's happening in Southern Africa? We learned on a farm, they were dying at a huge rate eating this genetically engineered corn 3 times a day or more. But even within the corporate structure, there's this narrowing of thinking. So it's an epidemic of giving power away and saying it's someone else's responsibility. So now we're in a situation that's like, okay, what do I do if I want to change that? Well, you just heard about the dangers of GMOs and the dangers of GMO 2.0. You can't do what I'm doing. I'm 24/7 on this, but you can do something. And we haven't yet been taught how to go, okay, I want to put a hand in it. Maybe it's contributing money. Maybe it's like, okay, I'm going to change my life. I'm going to record the changes and I'm going to put it on my social media and convince others. Or I'm going to get a movie and share it with people, whatever it is. Now, it's an interesting thing. Some people's energies are, if they hear about all these things, they get angry and all upset. And it's like, I'm going to take responsibility of it. I'm going to get stressful. And that's not sustainable. So we have to have more control over our empowerment. Instead of feeling like a victim, we feel like a victor. So it's like, I'm going to determine what's food and not the food-shaped objects that Monsanto's giving us. I'm going to determine what I'm going to feed myself and my family. I'm going to determine how I'm going to spend my money and support what's going on and not just allow government priorities to take over. And in that sense, it's an empowerment. So then we can have our hand in many pies and feel like, yes, I'm part of the stream of the solution here and here and here. And I'm not going to stop my borders simply because it's too much, because I've learned how to digest information and turn it into empowerment rather than feeling like a victim. And then you become a model and a leader, and then other people want to know what you're doing, and then it just goes bigger.
Yeah. To sum all of that up, the thing that they don't teach us is that we have the power. All of us individuals, all of us, we are taught to think that one person can't make a difference. And I say bullshit, I love everything that you've said, because it's exactly what I'm doing here. This is something that I'm passionate about, that I geeked out listening to a podcast interview. And I'm like, well, we talk about behavior and spirituality and human design here, but you guys need to hear this. And I think it's so important. I think you're absolutely right. that we have to understand that we do have the power and we do have the choice. And we talk a lot about, our quantum reality. We live in a quantum reality. So where you focus your energy, this is what you're creating. And we need to take responsibility for that. And I think that this is everything that you're saying, the silo piece. I think it was probably the first person that I heard talk about it was Bruce Lipton. And, he was talking about how all the sciences are siloed, and no one talks to each other. And in my world, my background is as a behavioralist, but I didn't, I was all science-based, fact-driven, all of those sort of things. And then I started to sort of, put my toe in the spirituality thing or metaphysics. And I was like, holy crap, everything works together. Everything works together. And I feel like that's what you're saying as well. It's like, once we understand that, even though we are conditioned to think that everything that we contribute is just a tiny little piece and it almost doesn't matter, it's total bullshit. We are creating our reality. And the more of us that can just be passionate about the things that we're passionate about, because they're the things that this soul and this heart are driven to share, then just freaking share it. Even though, like I said right at the beginning of this episode, I'm kind of like, I know this isn't my normal guest, but it's something I want you guys to hear. And I feel like it's a very much part of our mission. Like, I'm here to create powerful communities. And part of that is to remove this silo, get everyone talking to each other. Everyone, no longer afraid of, we can't tell those people or those people don't get along with those people. No, that's crap. We actually all do get along. And if we're listening to our heart, if we're listening to our soul, then it's going to tell us the same, that we all belong here together. We're all equally as powerful as each other, whether we're leading billions of people or we're tending to our garden. We are all playing a significant role in this world that we live in. So I love everything. As you can see, I'm very passionate about what you're saying.
I'm really glad you brought up Bruce. So I was interviewing Bruce for another summit that I did, and he talked about that you take the cells of a person and you put it, on another part of hundreds of miles away, and you change the reaction in you and the cell reacts. And It's also between mother and child because there's still some cells between them. And so I'm aware of the field, but there's also field effects and critical thresholds. And it's like a certain percentage of iron filings become aligned, the whole thing becomes a magnet. 1% of the pacemaker cells in the heart go together, it sets the pace for the whole heart. We've seen in history leaps in consciousness where all of a sudden there's a change. Sometimes it's a leap in terms of a scientific understanding. Sometimes if it's a new Renaissance type age, their leaps seem to be happening very quickly now because it's afforded by all these ways of connecting. So I don't think consciousness is linear and local. And I think that if we think about making our contribution as a node in alignment. So when you have incoherent light and you have 110 photons, it's equal to 10. If you have coherent light, it's a laser and it's equal to the square of the number. 10 times 10 or 100, 1,000 times 1,000 is, 10, whatever.
A lot more light.
Yeah. I used to be really good at math.
I'm sure you're 100 million times better than me, so you're still winning.
So it turns out that what we're lending, I do a lot of overt activity. I testify, I speak, I write books, I've made 5 movies, I do things out there on the physical level. But there's a way of aligning on the non-physical level. There's a way of saying yes to this and being open to it, and not in the fear of it, but in the so all of that helps redefine the human condition. And in this case, what's interesting, we all know people who, or have heard of people who had some kind of very serious diagnosis or prognosis. And it caused a change in their thinking, a change in their behavior, and it became a blessing. Now think about the fact that we now have an existential threat where a single microbe, as you'll see in the film, Don't Let the Genie Out of the Bottle, could have ended terrestrial plant life far worse than the pandemic, cataclysm. And another one that you'll see in the film could have changed weather patterns. And these are just two bad actors in the face of a million or a billion being released, when we realize that one high school kid can do this, that anyone can do this, we all of a sudden realize we have a responsibility individually to change. And what's the change? It's like, instead of acting randomly, we must change our relationship with nature and be a protector, because we have the ability to destroy it. And if we do nothing, it can be destroyed and replaced and corrupted and disaster. So it's like that prognosis or diagnosis. And unlike climate change and other things that seem to require, collectively we'll have the problem. This is something where individually we have the responsibility. So it's even more motivation, more compelling to make that change and go, oh no, I need to change. I need to protect nature. And I need to tell others as well. And I think that the silver lining here, one silver lining is everyone now knows about microbes because of the pandemic. So if it has a silver lining, it's going to protect the planet that way. Another silver lining is that in the handling of this, we handle many things. Because when we change our relationship with nature and go, oh, nature is sacred, and we have the ability to permanently restructure it in ways that are haphazard and dangerous, we need to protect nature. And that changes a lot. And we begin to get more wisdom of nature and whatnot. So ultimately, I think this particular cause is going to be a way that humanity can leap forward, and that we are going to responsibly deal with the technology. It will be handled. We need to do it. It's going to require time, money, and effort. But I think at the other side, it won't just be a series of laws. It will be an understanding, like it'll be taught in every classroom.
Yeah.
That this is our job.
Yeah, I love that. And it makes me think of, Zach Bush always talking about, like, we are nature. Like we are damaging ourselves by damaging her. And there's so much, innate wisdom. And as you say, especially being in Australia, I'm very aware of the Indigenous heritage of, the Aboriginal people are the only Indigenous people that they have there's no, big buildings. They've left nothing on the land. Millions of years they've been here and nothing has been left. Like they are the ultimate, custodians of the land. It's what they call themselves. And for me, I'm like, God, we all need to get on that train. We all need to work that stuff out. And I want to, because we touched on consciousness, this is the other thing that I think is really, that I'm curious about, because we talk a lot about consciousness. And I just had the guys from, I don't know, have you ever heard of the FLFE, Focus Life Force Energy?
No, I haven't.
Oh my God, you'd love them. You'd love them. And they do a lot of work around consciousness, and they actually have a product that helps us on the day-to-day raise our consciousness. They're the most, I would have to say, some of the most integrous business people I've ever come across. Like they're incredible. So we talk a lot about consciousness in our community. We talk a lot about this, and I'm curious with everything that we're talking about, GMO and GMO 2.0. Ultimately, as far as I can see it from where I'm sitting, and I'm just one person, but the whole point of the chaos of this moment in time that we live in is to raise our consciousness, because once we raise our consciousness, then we're going to have access to so many more solutions. We're going to, all the solutions that you're looking for, we will have access to them. But until we raise our consciousness, or enough of us get to that tipping point that raise our consciousness, it's almost like we're just banging around in the dark until we can access that. So that makes me think, straight away, have you had any experience? Has anyone ever mentioned it to you, how potentially us consuming GMOs is actually affecting our connection to consciousness, source, God, universe, whatever you call it? Have you done any work around that?
Well, I've been practicing transcendental meditation since 1975, and I lived in Fairfield, Iowa, which is kind of the home of it, when I started out. And we were very concerned about personal development, spiritual development, development of consciousness, eating these foods. And one of the things that Maharishi Mahesh Yogi, who founded TM, he also founded Maharishi Ayurveda, a particular way of bringing out Ayurveda. And I remember some doctors coming back from a course in India and explaining the Ayurvedic concept of how herbs work. And he said that the body of the human is all the laws of nature expressed. And there's a sequence that's appropriate and it expresses it as health. And that if there's a problem, let's say with your ear, that was the example he used, it's that the sequence of laws of nature is not expressing properly. It's kind of out of sequence. Now, the herbs have different laws of nature, plants, etc., that are manifested in those plants. So you pick a plant that has the same laws of nature that created the ear and supports the ear's functioning healthy. And you take the herb and it's like a resonating effect. And it realigns and resets the proper sequence in the body so that the ear gets healed.
Yeah.
Now, I remember I spoken at the World Conference in Ayurveda in India and then also at another conference in Canada about this with an Ayurvedic doctor. And I explained that there is actually a scientific correlation to this. We now know that plants create, well, they have DNA and they create RNA, and that we ingest the RNA. And when we ingest the RNA, RNA can regulate the expression of DNA, meaning that DNA can produce proteins and they go up in this big orchestration, more of this, less of this, turn this off, turn this on. But RNA is part of that orchestration. And if we eat herbs or whatever, food, their RNA can regulate the expression of our DNA.
Wow.
The RNA is a sequence. It's a specific sequence of laws of nature in that plant. What's it do? It actually influences the expression of sequences in us. So it's a close correlation. I don't know if it's what the Ayurvedic masters were thinking, but it works.
Yeah.
And so when you think about genetic engineering and changing the structure of the sequence and realizing that you're now having herbs and food which are resonating the wrong sequence.
Yeah.
You can look at it from the RNA side, or you can just look at it from the consciousness side, the field effect side, and realize we're shifting our ability to express and embody the proper sequence of the laws of nature because we're bringing in tuning forks with the wrong notes.
Yeah.
So in that sense, it's very concerning. So, I felt like I wasn't involved with GMOs until I heard about them in 1996. I realized, in a triage, which is a medical term for, used to be in the military, you have the three different groups. Those that are going to live no matter what your medical team does, those that are going to die no matter what your medical team does, and those that are going to live or die depending on what you do. And thus you deal with them. So I was like, with GMOs, it's like a bleeding patient. You have to stop the bleeding or they'll die. We need to protect the food supply if we're going to see the kind of changes in humanity that we're working for and hoping for. We need consciousness and health to be pristine and not to be overshadowed by this technology. So I just, became full-time for that. And I've been doing that for 27 years.
Well, it's just so incredible. And before I let you go, I just want to share one thing, which I think is fascinating as well, because I don't know, I know that you heard about your human design. Do you know of the gene keys?
I've heard of them, yes.
Yes. So as you're speaking, so the gene keys, they're created by an incredible man called Richard Rudd. They are connected to the 64 hexagrams of the I Ching. The I Ching we now know has been mapped back to our 64 genetic codons. And as you're speaking, and because we use these energies, that these 64 energies that we all have access to, we have some of them that are consistent, some of them are inconsistent. And as you're speaking, I'm like, wow, there could be people out there that are working with their human design or their gene keys that maybe they feel like they're banging their head against a wall trying to get the high potential of this particular energy. And it could be as something as simple as changing your diet. And I think often this goes back to that silo piece we're talking about, because often we don't think, well, I want to express more of my greatness, so I should eat differently. Like, that can sometimes feel like it's so distant. But having said that, I know for me personally, and I'm a line 3, so it's all about my experiences, that when I changed what I ate, and because I grew up very healthy, my father did all the cooking, very healthy. We never had takeout. He made everything from scratch. And then it was like the early years of my 20s when I just fed myself, even though I had all these great principles, that I just got sick, So I actually think that for the listeners out there, guys, if you're struggling with a particular gate, a particular gene key, this could be it. So go and experiment. And then tell everybody, tell all your friends. Jeffrey, thank you so much for being here. I have loved talking to you. I'm very conscious that I don't want to take up too much of your time. And I know you've shared how people can get in touch with you or find your work, but could you just remind everyone one more time, what's the website, maybe the book if they want to hear it, do you have a podcast or anything like that?
I do. It's called Live Healthy, Be Well. And you could sign up for the podcast, and I'm going to be putting probably some more personal development, spiritual, uplifting things. A lot of it's just the GMO speak, but that may change soon. I have this responsibletechnology.org is the mothership for our institute nonprofit. You can make donations there, watch films. You go to secretingredientsfilm.com and you can watch families and individuals who switch to organic just change their life. It's the most compelling film we've ever seen in terms of changing people's diet. Yeah. So people watch it and they want to change their diet immediately.
Brilliant.
And we have petsandgmos.com and we have all sorts of things, but I think starting with getting onto the newsletter for responsibletechnology.org, we have Facebook and we have Instagram and now TikTok. So I'm a TikTok.
Amazing. Look at you go. Apparently I'm on TikTok, but I have no idea. My team does it. I'm
hundreds
useless.
of thousands of people have watched me run past the screen like that.
I love it. Well, we'll put all of those details into the show notes so everyone can access your incredible work. And before I let you go, is there any last message that you'd like to share with our community?
Thank you. I love being asked that. In fact, at the end of my talks, I usually say, and there's one last thing I want to say, and almost always I have no idea what it is until I start speaking.
I love that.
I want to see because I'm a manifestor, right?
Yeah, exactly. You like the sources moving through you, man. You've got to inspire us into action. Go.
There is a activation potential here right now. So much information has been given. From an intellectual standpoint, it can be overwhelming. And if you get stuck on the intellectual overwhelm, nothing will happen. If there's also a sense of like, oh my God, my disease or my kid's disease could be related to that, and then it could inspire the fear or the anxiety or the guilt, which is the worst. And so there's a lot of information, but inside it, there's like an activation potential, right? And that activation potential is what it's looking for really is a yes. I'm going to make a change. I'm going to make a difference and a commitment now. If people wait an hour, a day, a week, the power dissipates. One of the things that is the most important factor in whether a person makes a change in their lives when they hear a talk like this is how quickly they start. And so it may mean for some writing a shopping list, making a statement, making a phone call, going to the site, signing up, doing something, but now is the time to make that commitment and yes. And I would say do it in a way of celebration. There's all sorts you can digest this any way you want. You can digest it and hold fear, anger, sadness. But I think celebration is in order here because it's like, okay, now I got a handle on something I never knew before, and we're going to make a change. And then however you want to share it, if you do, however you want to live it, it's all up to you. And I just want to just say right now, I mean, what you've brought in terms of this podcast, the kind of people and how you hold this, it's like people want something, and there's something right here. So I'm going to suggest that people make a decision now before you say goodbye.
I love that. And one of my principles, my whole community, everyone who works with me knows that one of my highest principles is take imperfect action. So go take imperfect action, people. Jeffrey, thank you so much for your time. I'm going to go and binge your books and your movies. And yeah, I'm so inspired, and I'm so grateful that we could share all of this with this incredible community. So thank you, Jeffrey.
Thank you so much, Emma.
Thanks, everyone, for being with us today. I trust you got what you needed and that you're off to take your imperfect action. Thank you for being here, and I so look forward to having you on the next podcast. Bye for now.
Thanks, everyone, for being here all the way to the end of the podcast. I hope you got lots of value out of it. I certainly had a lot of fun doing it. Could I please ask that you share this podcast with friends if you found it valuable? And also, bonus points, could you leave a review for me as well on Apple? It would be greatly appreciated. If at any point you would like to be on the podcast, or you've got questions that you'd like me to discuss on the podcast, by all means get on my socials and DM me. Everything you need is there in the show notes. Have an awesome day. Bye for now.